Yeah, so we had the big event last night was the LARES discussion, and I, of course, was on the losing side of that vote. But I want to explain how it works. That for many, many years, people have been putting a lot of intensity into the climate change type of story. But actually, I go back to the very beginning of it. I worked at NASA in 1979, worked for James Hansen, the famous climate guy. And everything they predicted back then, no one knew it was wrong. There were a lot of assumptions in the models, but basically those models have never worked. And that was called global warming. And by the 1990s, all the data was uncooperative and those models were kind of dead. But then they made up the new phrase climate change, which includes all kinds of regional climate change. But it's really an admission that the global idea doesn't work very well and the CO2 is not that important. But nobody cares because by the time it's a government program, there are lots of people who are benefiting from it who just don't want to let go. So it turned into something that lasted forever. And the second round of failures, first round was just all the data not cooperating with global warming. The second round is then the leaks and the emails, showing that a lot of the referee processes and the IPCC reports and how they were prepared, that they weren't really following any. They were just, continuing a kind of a campaign of brainwashing the public. And then the third strike against climate is the announcement from China back in 2015 that they had finished their grid. Well, if India's not far behind, Brazil's ahead of India, it's more like about the same as China and so forth. There's no more big waves of carbon to come in the world. So the story is not just, well, you can argue about the models still, but basically the input is basically over. The big growth, the big wave of carbon is, the last big wave is China, India, Brazil, and that's almost done. So my point is that the climate story has actually come to pass and that it stays alive because there are lots of people in the national media and in Washington that make a living off it. And they just keep going. And it's so frustrating to communicate that to the other councilors. I think it stays alive because they're living in this other bubble of information that is quite old and doesn't really work. So I wish we would drop these constraints on our public. We have real environmental sustainability problems, but they're all local. It's about getting electricity and it's about making it locally and taking care of our solid waste. And I think we have some concerns about the water as well. Those are our local problems. Those are sustainability problems we should pay attention to. But the national ones there's a lot of things in the national media that are just, I don't know what you call them, fear campaigns and people with other agendas than information. Accurate information is not one of their agendas. So I wish we would drop that stuff in our local environment and just, stick with the things that work for us.